And we're back with Hot Mike from Los Angeles, speaking about the intended Senate run of Kid Rock to be senator from the great state of Michigan. And we've got our friend Jeff Cruer is on the line with us here, talking about this candidacy and some of the sort of really remarkable aspects about what this candidacy really brings to America, especially today in the wake of the election of Donald Trump. Jeff, I got into an argument a little while ago. Maybe it wasn't a little while ago, might have been a couple of years now. I was talking to somebody, and we were arguing about Bush and Obama, and this guy said, well, at least Obama's smarter than George Bush. And I said, really? You know, before he became president, George Bush was a supersonic fighter pilot. Barack Obama filled out forms. He handed out forms to people. George Bush was flying supersonic aircraft and delivering weapons. If I had a choice of which one I think would be easier to do, I think that filling out the forms would be easier. The reason I bring this up is because the left has always conflated intelligence with rhetorical skill and things like fashion sense and polish, but it ain't necessarily so.
Well, Bill, look at what they did to Ronald Reagan. He's someone who I think had incredible rhetorical skill, someone who I think was very smart, yet they always considered him to be a dunce. And I think one of the reasons was he was a strong conservative. And look at how they inflate people like Al Gore, who I think is truly a dunce, yet they claim he's some sort of a genius. And I think you see it with Barack Obama. You see it with Donald Trump. Somehow Donald Trump is an idiot, according to the left. Yet he's a graduate of Wharton. He built a $10 billion business. He won against all the experts who said he couldn't do it. So who's really the genius and who's really the idiot? And I think Kid Rock is someone who's very smart and someone who's anybody that can have a successful career spanning as long as he has, and to do it with such a unique style, and to also go against the grain and articulate views that others can't articulate, and then to see an opportunity here to possibly run for the Senate. I think all of that takes a lot of smarts. And listen, I look forward to him being in a body right now that I don't have much respect for, with people like Susan Collins and Lindsey Graham and all these other folks. I think Kid Rock is going to elevate the Senate big time.
Yeah, and I agree with you, Jeff. And this is the part where progressives' heads just come off. The smoke starts curling out of their ears. That Kid Rock was going to elevate the Senate. How could such a thing be possible? Look at the man. He looks. Well, for God's sakes, he looks like a working man. I mean, seriously, how can we possibly have somebody like that in the Senate? You know why I think Kid Rock is would be a good senator, and why I think he's got a good chance to win? He's up on stage there, so he's got appeal, he's got charisma, he's got working class charisma, but he's wearing a T-shirt in one of those clips we saw that said Motor City, and Motor City, Detroit, is the poster child for the Democratic Party's abandonment of working people as they veered ever further to the left and courted more and more of these micro identity groups, and more millionaires and more billionaires in Silicon Valley. They got further and further away from it. Detroit has been run by Democratic mayors and councilmen for something like 60 years uninterrupted. And there's a very popular meme going around there, which is, for those of you who don't know, it's a picture with a kind of a caption on it. And it shows a picture of Detroit and Hiroshima side by side in 1945. And in 1945, Detroit is the envy of the world. It looks like Metropolis. It's this absolutely booming, thriving city filled with industry and so on. And Hiroshima is simply a couple of brick walls standing. It's just immediately after the bomb. And then right below those two pictures are two pictures of Detroit today. And now it's Hiroshima that's the thriving, teeming metropolis where people are successful and everything's glistening and new. And it's Detroit that looks like it's been hit by an atomic bomb. It hasn't been hit by an atomic bomb. It's been hit by something much more destructive than that. It's been hit by Democratic policies. And I think Kid Rock's going to be able to make that connection.
I think so, too. And it's not just Detroit, Bill. Look at every urban area in the country. 99.9% of them are run by liberal Democrats. And look at all the problems. They're very commonplace. The blight, the drugs, the poverty, the crime, the bad infrastructure, of course, the bad job opportunities. We have it here in Louisiana, in New Orleans. Democrats have run New Orleans since Reconstruction. We haven't had a conservative Republican ever. And many of these other big cities the same way. So Kid Rock maybe can connect to some of the voters who traditionally vote Democrat due to his music background, due to his appeal, and maybe be a very dynamic candidate that the Democrats going to have a hard time with. But I'm hoping that other candidates can also make that appeal to these folks in the urban areas that, listen, we've been voting Democrat for decades. It's not working. The problems are getting worse. Let's try something new.
Yeah, and I have to tell you, if somebody's going to reach America's inner cities, and these are the places that really pay the price for this Democratic neglect, it's going to be somebody like Kid Rock with that kind of street cred, and not somebody like Mitt Romney. It's going to be somebody who can basically make the exact same case that you've made. These are murder pits. You've been utterly abandoned on this, and I think he's got a real good chance to make that case. Here's the final question for you, for all of us, I think, today, Jeff. And the question really comes down to something pretty simple, and this is, I think, a fundamental divide between conservatives and progressives. The question is this: can the people govern themselves, yes or no? Needless to say, the Democrats would be leaping on, oh, no, we love democracy. Well, it doesn't seem that you do. The Democratic candidates for presidents have almost all been lawyers, as opposed to the conservative candidates, which have usually been businessmen of some kind or another. And I think the idea that a regular Joe, just like a Joe the plumber, a regular guy, could go to Washington as a representative of the state or as a senator from that state, I think it fills the progressives with a sense of embarrassment and loathing and deep concern, because it violates their elitist privilege. How can you possibly be a senator from Michigan if you don't have a Harvard Law degree like I do?
And how can you possibly be a senator if you haven't been in the political system for years, if you haven't been a lobbyist or a politician or a lawyer or living off the government? And that's the, I think, great appeal of someone like a Donald Trump, someone like a Kid Rock, coming in from outside the political spectrum and bringing some fresh insight into all of these problems. And I think, Bill, that's what the founders wanted. They wanted people that would go in there, serve, not make it a career, not make it something where they would stay for decades, and then go back home and then have some fresh people get in there with some different perspectives, new energy. And that's why hopefully I'm excited about some of these new type of candidates like Kid Rock, who are not professional politicians.
You mentioned this in passing earlier, Jeff. You mentioned your disappointment in the current Senate, to say the least, with the Obamacare repeal. You know, we expect that Democrats are going to be for big government, and anybody who was watching the scorecard saw that Obama's elected in 2008, a huge Democratic landslide all across the board. The Democrats in 2008 had the presidency, the House, and the Senate. They used these levers of power to ram Obamacare down the throat of the nation with all this, legerdemain and all these little tricks deemed to have passed and all the rest of it. And then the very next election, in 2010, the American people give the House back to the Republicans. What's his name? Jim, the Raging Cajun, the political commentator.
James Carville.
Garfield, sorry, yeah. James Carville said after Obama was elected in 2008 that this is the beginning of 40 years of uninterrupted Democratic rule, and he was only off by 38 years. Shortly after that, we get the Senate in 2014. We promised to repeal Obamacare. Didn't happen. And they've been saying, well, all we need is the president to sign the bill. Well, now we have a president to sign the bill, and now Republicans are chickening out. And this is what happens, I think, when you have a professional political class who look at elected office as if it's the last helicopter out of Saigon, and who will do anything to maintain their position. And whatever principles you may have are just right out the window. I think that was the appeal of Donald Trump. People got the impression that he didn't need the job. And I get that same kind of vibe off of Kid Rock.
Yeah, I do too. And the thing about these professional politicians that I hate, they're insulated from the grassroots, their constituents, the people that they serve, and they're listening to the lobbyists and the special interests. So they don't understand the anger of their constituents, of the people. Donald Trump did all these rallies. He connected with people. I think Kid Rock has that same kind of connection. And I think that's what we need. We need people that are going to be listening to the voters, to the people that are actually out there working hard, not the elitists and the insiders. And if Republicans had been listening to the voters in their party, this would have happened the day Donald Trump got inaugurated. But it's taken now 6 months and 4 days finally for this thing to get passed. And finally, we're going to go forward with something. I'm hoping and praying that they deliver, because if not, there's going to be a big time backlash, I think, against the Republican Party.
Yeah, and if they don't deliver, then Kid Rock is going to be the most ordinary, run-of-the-mill candidate for office in the America to come from the Republican side. That's absolutely for sure. Jeff, thanks very much for joining us here today. Jeff Cruer is a political analyst and he's host of Ringside Politics. It's been a pleasure talking with you, buddy, and we look to have you back again real soon.
Thank you, Bill.
The issue, ladies and gentlemen, is very simple. Do the people have the ability to govern themselves, yes or no? The founders never intended that there would be a political class. The founders' idea was that regular people would come to Washington. They'd do 2 years or 4 years or whatever, 6 years, and go home. And it's time for a lot of these people to go home. I know Kid Rock looks unorthodox. I like that. I suspect his chances are much better than I thought they were at the beginning of this segment. We're going to find out. We'll be back tomorrow with the Hot Mic Show here from Los Angeles. I'm Bill Whittle right here on NRATV.